Hello, and welcome to the Brad Beldon Show, your go-to podcast for all things roofing, the latest buzz in San Antonio, local politics, and just about anything else under the sun.
Today, I'm excited for our guest, Chris Yano, CEO of RYNO Strategic Solutions, and also a podcast host. Chris, could you please share the story on how you started RYNO and what inspired you to focus on, of all things, the home improvement industry?
Yeah, sure. First off, did you say that you discuss all things politics? Like, isn't that what you're not supposed to talk about with friends and politics?
So I got to admit, when you know Danny, and Danny and I have been working together for over 30 years. And when I told Danny that we wanted to start a podcast, Danny said, no politics. And I said, no politics. And then we did the first show and he said, no politics. And I said, well, what about just local politics? So we're still fighting about that right now. So he changes my scripts a lot. So I guess maybe we change the introduction, say, maybe we talk a little bit about politics, maybe we don't.
Well, good luck, but it can be entertaining too, right? So, I mean, you just never know the outcome of it. That's the problem. You asked about how I started the company, which, to give the listeners a little bit of info is, I've had the business for 16 years. It's called RYNO Strategic Solutions, and it's a digital marketing company specifically for home services is how we started it. It's since morphed into home services and home improvements over the years. But how it started was I was working. I learned internet marketing back in 2004. So, which seems like forever ago now, but it was not that I had like any intention on doing it. It was just that I learned I was good at sales. And I understood remember, you probably did stuff in the Yellow Pages back in the day, Brad, because you're a little older than me.
Oh, yeah. I'm a lot older than you, actually.
I know. But it was like my first sales job was in Yellow Pages in Phoenix, Arizona. I'm not, I'm from Indiana, but I moved to Arizona after college. And my first sales job was at the local Yellow Page company. And I like it because I'm good with talking with people, and I kind of naturally was attracted to the contractor level blue collar stuff because I grew up on a huge farm. I mean, you know these things about me, but your listeners know. Grew up on a huge farm, so it was easy. It's comfortable for me to talk to contractors. What I didn't love about the Yellow Page stuff was hey, this many people looked at this page. You didn't really know that. You had an idea. You could throw a call tracking number in your ads and get some information from it, but it was still you're still using subjective information to figure out, was it working? At the end of the day, it's no, do you know exactly when people called from that ad and what did it return in revenue? I could get behind that number. I just didn't like all the things building up to it. How can I possibly make an adjustment to a color and expect it to produce X, more in potential call volume or customers? So when the internet stuff started to come around, and you could track more, I really liked that. So, from being from Indiana, and again, I know you know this about me, but to the listeners, I've raced cars for a long time, from go-karts to sprint cars to midgets to Indy lights to, all kinds of stuff. And the thing that I always loved was data acquisition. So you could see, the better the data you got, you could start to see if you're braking too late going into a turn. Could I go into that turn faster? Could I have gotten back on the throttle on the exit of the turn? All those things I loved learning because it was facts. It was actual numbers, and it gave me trust. Right? Okay, good. I can see I could have, braked, half a second later and picked up, a few tenths on my lap time. So when I got into internet marketing, it was that I could track everything. I could actually see who's clicking on what, who came into a site, did they call, did they send the call? You could see all these things. So it made me feel more comfortable about it, and I enjoyed it. And I was really, really good at it. But the problem was the company I was working for, I was selling something that I believed they would deliver, and they weren't delivering. And that didn't feel good. So I can't go and look you in the face again, somebody who's spending their money and has human beings behind the business, that they're relying on them making good decisions, and in good faith say, yeah, you should go ahead and buy this from me, and knowing that the company was not going to execute. So I wasn't raised that way. That's not not my DNA. It's not my integrity. So I said, you know what? How difficult can this be, Brad? I'm just going to go start my own business. I'm good at sales and marketing. So needless to say, did it, and I learned how to build a business by being in the business. And I went through all the things that new business owners probably went through. But my one ace in the hole was that my wife, who is the COO, co-founder of the business, is really great at all the things I'm not. So operations, finance, management, things like that. And we were able to, combine our two strengths and build a pretty incredible business. So that's like a really short version of getting into it. So 16 years later, we have 180 RYNOs and 700 contractors as customers.
So you talked about the yellow pages. It's funny because we used to get our yellow pages delivered here on a pallet, and because we had so many extensions at our office, and they delivered a yellow page. We had 100 numbers, right? Even though if we weren't using 100 numbers, we got a yellow page for every number that we had on our DID. We get 100 books, and Susan would come here and she would tear out the dry cleaning coupon out of every 100 books. And I'm like, Susan, there's only 52 weeks out of the year. She said, well, I can go twice a week. So when that stopped, it was really funny. But the yellow pages, leaving the yellow pages changed not only our industry, but even the dry cleaning industry, right? Because they had to find a different way to attract customers than the typical way that they were doing it. And one of the things that you talked about was the car racing. I don't know if you know this, but I'm working with the University of Texas at Austin, and we have developed a program called Winning. And part of that program is we're working with COTA, Circuit of the Americas, and we're developing a leadership program on using the racetrack and lessons learned on the racetrack. And one of the things when we were at our first meeting was you were talking about the turns, is how to approach a turn, right? If you don't approach it correctly, you can end up going wide right and hitting the wall. And that's the sort of thing that you have in business too, right? Is that you picking up that business acumen that Anna has that helped you grow your business because she had that business acumen and you had the sales side. Sounds like a perfect match.
Yeah, it worked out well that way. And we've trusted one another. And I think a big part of it too is just being resourceful, right? You've got those who say, oh, I can't figure it out, and they stop. And you got those of us that say, I can't figure it out, I'm going to find a way. And we both have that. But yeah, our strengths complemented one another. So we're lucky in that aspect, but there's still plenty of things we had to learn on the fly too, like the unknowns you don't know about building a business.
So as Anna being the COO, y'all are having to navigate running the business together while maintaining a healthy family life at home. Susan has always supported my endeavors. My mom and dad worked together. Every dinner that we had growing up, we were talking roofing. We were talking kitchens. We used to be in the kitchen business. We were talking remodeling. How do y'all maintain a healthy family life when you're bringing work home? Because I know it's hard.
Yeah, this is probably the most common question that we get. And we just, today we just released a podcast with her and I on our podcast, To the Point Home Services podcast. And she doesn't like to be out front very much. She's very much like back of house. But I'd love to get her to talk because she's so smart. She's so good at working with people and building leadership, and has had a phenomenal track record. But you're right. Like there's some wins and losses to it. There's more wins than losses, I believe, though. But because the fact that we work together, we had to establish boundaries right away. Meaning sales and marketing is what I'm best at. And so if there comes a decision where she can give her opinion on it, but ultimately if it's a sales or marketing decision, I'm the A1 in that scenario. So whatever I decide is what we're going to do, and she has to support that. If it's business, operations, recruiting, finance, whatever, I can give my opinion, vice versa, but she's the A1 in that situation. So ultimately, whatever decision she makes, I have to be okay with that, and I support it. And though that's not always the easiest thing to do, it's what's worked well for us. The hard part is not taking it home is unreasonable, especially because
it's very unreasonable.
Yeah, is that because you're so passionate about it, and it's what I love to do. And she's part of it. When you have a difficult day, it's a lot easier for your spouse to understand why, because they know the people or the situation and the business. And so there's some understanding there that does make it hard or make it easier. But I'll tell you what, here's one thing I learned on how to use it to my advantage. This is where I found a little win in this, because more often than not, she's right.
Okay, I'm listening because Susan gives me her opinion and my opinion. So I'm listening really closely on this one.
Yeah. So here's one thing I learned how to navigate. I feel like my wife remembers everything, and I do not remember everything, and she takes advantage of that. So whenever we get into a disagreement, we'll call it a disagreement, she starts to throw in like facts at me, and I'm like, well, she knows I don't remember, so she's already like trying to win the game, and like maybe it turns into an argument. Well, I learned how to use the business side of it to my advantage, because she may not talk to me at home because she's mad at me about something, but she has to talk to me at the office. She's got no choice. So I'll find reasons to go and have a conversation with her. And when you're having like a normal conversation with someone about business or whatever, even here, it does kind of bring that, like, the conflict down a little bit. Yeah. So then when you get home, it's kind of like, we already kind of were talking. It's kind of, we're over it. So I use that lever quite often to get past, if I made her mad or did something or whatever. So I use.
Okay. So do y'all ride together to work?
We don't, on purpose.
Oh, okay. That's good. That's good. I didn't, I know a lot of my friends that ride together to work, and Susan doesn't listen to ESPN radio. And I don't listen to the podcast she listens to. It drive us both nuts.
We try to do that that's very intentional. And I know a lot of people do, because you're thinking, oh, well, we just save gas and whatever. Like, I want to save my sanity, and so does she. So we have to have that gap. We have to have that time.
Yeah. That's really cool. Well, since you started in 2008, clearly y'all's leadership roles have changed somewhat, although you divided them up, but how has your leadership journey changed and evolved since 2008? I mean, 16 years is a long time working together, and I'm sure it's different than when you first started.
Slightly. Yeah. You know what? I think probably the most challenging thing that I went through, and I'll kind of tell you when I first started, I wore every hat in the marketing role. Like, you still have to be aware of your finances and your P&Ls and like what you're spending and what you're forecasting and like what you're buying versus what you're getting from, like all the things, in running a business. So you can't really get away from all those things. So I'm wearing many hats. The leadership piece that became the hardest for me was the delegation part of it. Like, nobody can do it better than you, the owner, is like this mentality I have. It's like, you're afraid when you start hiring people, you're afraid to hand things off. At least I was. Because you care so much about.
I think that's common.
Totally, it is. You care so much. If you genuinely care about the customer experience and the customer service, like what you're doing, like the business that you're doing, and the outcome of what you're doing, then I think that's a very normal feeling to not want to hand it off to somebody else when you're the best option. But you can't scale like that. So
no, you can't.
I really had to learn how to find somebody who could do XYZ 80%. Of as good as I did, and then coach them on the other 20, and that was very difficult, and to do that, and when Anna's better at managing people, so she would come in and say, okay, cool, we have the right person, and we know that they're doing it about 80%. We need them at 100. Here's the plan, and then holding them accountable to execute on those plans, and that gave me confidence to let things go, knowing it was going to be managed. The person was going to be managed properly. But that was the most difficult initial decision I faced was, it wasn't even making the right hire. It was just making sure I could let go and trust somebody to do as close to as good of a job as I know I could do.
And I think all leaders have the same problem, especially in family business. And I've been in this business since I was 12, so 49 years. And some of my friends who aren't in this business ask me all the time, I can't imagine being in the home improvement business, because the home is the most valuable investment. It's the most personal thing. If I come and do work on your building, I may make a mistake, but it's not personal. If I come and mess something up on your house, everybody's unhappy. And so that tends to make working at a home much more difficult. And so I think that the home improvement industry in itself is a unique business, but even customer acquisition has changed over time. And being in the digital space, what trends are you seeing that are shaping the home improvement industry today that's different than when you and Anna got into it 16 years ago?
I mean, one, there's far more competition. I mean, I'm talking about like even you in your own market, there's far more competition. So you have a lot more variables. Just how the human buying habits have changed, over time. The way that we use cell phones, how we can buy something without talking to somebody. The artificial intelligence, like how that's coming into life. What people don't realize is that in my world, one of the common questions I get is, Chris, why don't you do digital marketing and traditional? Why don't you just do it all, like a one-stop shop in-house? And the problem I've had with that is we're exceptional at digital marketing. It's been 16 years. I know what to do. I know what levers to pull, and I can measure all of it. We would have just been okay at traditional. And I don't know about you. I didn't get into business to just be okay. And so I thought, rather than be distracted by this, I'm going to focus on digital. Well, what that's allowed me to do is to always be a leader in the industry because I got after it so early and I only focused on home services. So once you learn how your business functions, you, the contractor, and then I learned what's the buying journey of your customer, because that's the psychological game we're in marketing. Is I need to understand how to answer all the objections that your potential customer has before they ever even reach out to you to get them to call you. Like that's the game, that's the job. But when you do it, the same thing, the same services in the same industries for 16 years, you figure those things out pretty quick when you're measuring it every single day. And then it allows you to, pivot, A/B test, A/B test, A/B test, all these things. But, Google has like too many algorithm adjustments every week that nobody even knows about. Like they got some majors throughout the year, but there's usually a few every week. Well, we're the ones that got to chase that stuff down for you and make sure we're doing it right. And that takes a big,
well, and they're not
big
telling
team
you
of
they
people.
made the change.
No,
They're not telling you they made the change. You just got to figure it out.
They don't tell you. Yeah, you do figure it out, and then they roll it out post change. So you figure it out on the back end, but you can usually, like, sometimes, I'm not going to say every time you can feel it. Some you feel more than others. The majors you always feel, but if you're doing it right, it doesn't affect you negatively. So it's not been like a concern. It's just I want to be prepared for everything, and they don't give you the opportunity to be prepared. So if there is a major change, but like I'm in the digital space, man, so it's changing frequently. But my job is to know that and be innovative.
So would you say that Amazon has changed yours and my business more than any other company, and they're not even in our space? Is there anybody else that's changed it more? Because they influence that buying decision. It's that wow, right? They expect immediate satisfaction. Every customer, regardless of what your product is.
Yeah, well, they are training us that way, right? Like it's the instant gratification, that of purchasing X, Y. I'm no different, by the way. Like I thrive on instant gratification, and it is changing it. I will say, from how they're training buyers, to buyers to work with sellers. Yes, thankfully, in the home services and home improvements business today, Amazon's not sending out a contractor to your house yet. But people may not want to talk to you or me, and whether we like it or not, maybe we're old school and we want to pick up the phone and talk to Mr. or Mrs. Jones. They might not want to talk to you, and you got to be okay with that. And you have to find a way for them to come into your site and pick your service, have them come out for an inspection, whatever, without ever saying a word to you. And you just got to be okay with it, because you're not going to change you're not going to stop that. I'm not going to stop that. And it's like you can complain about it all you want, but it doesn't do you any good if you're not offering that type of way for your potential customers to communicate with you. Guaranteed, you're losing business, whether you like it or not. That's what's happening.
Well, wouldn't you say though that Roofle has taken that Amazon approach for that instant gratification? I mean, the price is pretty darn close, but I mean, you have an answer in about 5 seconds what it's going to cost.
Yeah, they've probably done it the best I've seen so far. And it at least keeps them engaged and down the path and are already entered the process. So that's what makes it like a roofle good is the perception of the buyer has an idea on cost and has already engaged the process with you, and the odds of them exiting that process without doing something is now on your shoulders based on your customer service or your other customer experience is how they would lose it more often than not. But it gets them down the path. That is a very underutilized still. Like, think about this. Of all there's so many roofing contractors, so many roofing companies. I'm going to use that
90,000
very loosely because some of these aren't really companies. But still, most aren't using that tool the best way to use that tool. They don't understand it. They're not using it from a marketing perspective. They are using it for like how do I get someone down the path and get the sale done when I'm talking to someone, but they're not using it from a marketing perspective. And I'm okay with that because I love competing against markets like that where there's minimal usage of that. It's a major tool. So, but yeah, they've probably got it cornered in the home services space with like the HVAC guys, like and like you got John Wayne down there, you've got Elmer's, you have some people I've known for years down there, Rosenberg, and they'll lead with these financing offers, but it could be using the as low as model, and based on a number of factors.
And they all do that.
But because it works really well for a straight new installation business. But the point is it just gets the homeowner engaged in the process, which then makes them stickier to become an actual customer.
Look, you're a really smart guy. I don't know how being educated in the Big Ten, you got so damn smart. And with Michigan winning the title, look, I mean, you and I both know that the SEC is king. Why do you continue to pull for the Big Ten? I mean, it's just lowering people's perception of how smart you really are.
Brad, here's one thing you have to learn. One, I appreciate you busting my chops. Here's what you got to know. As a Purdue fan, we do not talk Big Ten football, okay? Let's just put that aside.
Only Big Ten basketball.
We're talking Big Ten basketball, baby. What do you want to talk about that? Those are where the winners are. I just went, just got back because I take my son back every year, to the Purdue IU game. It's the biggest rival, and we just smoked them, in West Lafayette this past weekend. I only talk Purdue basketball, my friend. So you can bust my chops with Texas football all day long. Don't care. Yeah, you got Matthew McConaughey.
I didn't bring up Texas football. I just brought up at the SEC being the king.
I know what you didn't bring up. I'm just, reading between some lines.
Yeah. We were in New Orleans. That was a bad game, but that's okay. So you talked earlier, you're 208 episodes into your podcast. You're my 7th or 8th guest. What got you motivated to start the Point Home Services podcast? I mean, I learned very quickly that preparing for a podcast is a lot of work, and I had no idea it was that difficult to think about the questions and prepare everything, and then on the back end for your team to prepare the final product. What got you motivated to do it? 208 episodes. That's pretty incredible.
Yeah, you're learning. It's another full-time job because if you prep correctly, it's another full-time job. A lot don't prep correctly. That's what makes them great. I learned a couple of key pillars, and I'll tell you how I got into it, and it'll make sense. It's easier for you because you've gotten to know me really well and know me personally, so this will make sense. But you have these two main pillars you have to have when you're creating a podcast. And those two main pillars are it needs to be really entertaining or it needs to be very educational. And if you could make it both, it's a home run. So that's an art to some people. And some people, that's a challenge. But if you just land it on very entertaining or very educational, it'll be successful. But how I got into it was like, I have a servanthood mentality. And call it my roots, how I grew up, whatever, Midwesterner farmer, I'm an empathetic leader. I care about people. I want to see people do well. I want, if it's a result of something I done, I want them to do well. The biggest hang up I had as we got bigger as a business, I always we have this saying around here too called reputation over revenue. And if we always do what's right, and we work as hard as we can, we get smarter, we do better. We do some of the things for the contractors that they won't do to help themselves for XYZ reason. we'll always maintain a good reputation, and a reputation will build a good brand, and that will continuously bring in revenue. So that's what I mean by reputation over revenue. If you have a good reputation, the money will follow as you grow and scale. The problem with that, what started to happen was we have so many people reaching out to us to do business with us, and I kept having to say no. They didn't kind of fit our DNA, and we've kind of worked ourselves into a lot of the bigger contractors are like a more ideal customer for us. We know how to manage big contractors. And you have to say a lot of no's to people. And that sucks to have to say, no, I can't help you when they're reaching out to us to do business. And it's a very odd position to be in when you think about where you started and you're like, yeah, I'd love to work with you. Very opposite. So I had a partnership with a guy named Gary Vaynerchuk, if you've ever heard of him, for about 3 years. And Gary V is the one that talked me into it originally, saying, hey, you should start a podcast, and here's the plan. Like, you start it because you have this influence in the home services space at the time. This was in 2019. He said, you will launch it in 2020. We'll get about 10, 20 episodes under your belt that I'll come on and I'll jump on the podcast with you to help kind of give it a little bump. But this is a way for you, Chris, to now you're complaining about how you have to say all these no's to people. This is your way to give back to the industry. Notice it says the podcast that gives back behind me if you're watching on video. This is your way to continuously give back, which is one of my core values, to the industry without them being a customer. This is it, Chris. So you can take this and you can scale this and you can impact tens of hundreds of thousands of people, which we've done with the podcast. So that was like the kick in the pants I got to get it going. And he helped me tee the whole thing up. Like, he put his team on it. We sent my videographer to New York to work, like the whole deal. Sent me the whole like deck to put together. Did I send you this deck? No, I didn't send you the deck. I have the original deck he gave me to kind of build the podcast platform on. And that's how we got it kicked off, started. And really, I just thought, my first episode, I brought in one of the biggest players, customers in home services, and I just had a normal conversation with them. And I knew how to get him going, to kind of to razz him a little bit. And it would be no different than if I went to dinner with him. And I thought, I'm going to make this thing, entertaining, but also pull out education because, you're a bigger player, right? Like, people want to do what you're doing because what you're doing is successful. And it's called the herd mentality. So if you brought on the podcast and I got them to talk about the things that they've done that have made them successful, people hear that and then want to listen more and listen more and listen more. And so I used big influential people and also our knowledge to mix the two together to make it entertaining and want people to want to come back and listen over and over again. And I found a recipe that works that way. And I'm grateful I did it. It is a pain in the butt sometimes to get this thing stood up and keep going, but it's worth it. It's worth the time.
Well, you and I had problems at the beginning today. We were having an echo and we started late, and no matter how many times you've done it, something goes wrong. So you've done 208 episodes. Can you share with a meaningful one that still sticks in your head and why?
Yeah, sure. So I have 208. So we do one every week. And we have since the middle of January in 2020. So we're sitting at 208 as of this week that we're recording this. I would say the couple that stick out the most to me are for a couple different reasons. And this has changed, by the way. It's evolved as we've done others, as we've progressed through different episodes. But episode number 115 was with Mike Tyson, baddest man on the planet.
Oh, okay. That's cool.
That's cool. Pretty awesome, right? And it was, so the reason that one sticks out to me the most is, growing up, I'm 44 years old, growing up, in the 80s and 90s. Think about Mike Tyson back then. Like, that was the guy. Like, he was crazy, but we don't know that as kids. We just looked at him as like the baddest man on the planet, the boxer. And we played Mike Tyson Punch Out. So interviewing him was a very surreal moment. And honestly, I prepped so much for that because I had to submit the questions I could even ask him. And they got denied like 3 times. But I was having to watch other interviews he'd done to try and figure out what triggers him to say X, Y, Z and what doesn't trigger him. So I could really mold this perfect interview. But really, I was kind of living out a pretty cool dream of like interviewing Mike Tyson. And it was awesome. So that one's probably the most memorable to me personally. The professional one I've done.
Did you ask him about the ear? We
didn't. I wasn't allowed to ask about the ear, but he did share a story By the way, when I went into his green room, Brad, ahead of time, one, he smokes a ton of weed, by the way, ton of weed, because he's in the chronic business. Like he's in the marijuana business. So I could only go into his green room for about 5 minutes because I had to interview him 30 minutes later. I'm gonna be in there too long. But I walked in there and he has a handler, okay, because he's not all there. But he has a handler in there with him, and he goes, "Hey, Chris, ask me whatever you want, anything you want. Everything's on the table." And I'm looking back at his handler. His handler's like behind him going, no, you're not.
Not about the year. Not about the year.
No, I'm thinking, Mike, I submitted like 3 rounds of questions, man. But it was he came out and he absolutely crushed it. So that was probably the most memorable one from my personal experience. But the business one, and this applies to anybody listening right now, including you, Brad, and this was something that is impacted by me, is I don't know about you. I'm always trying to be a student and trying to learn new things about myself, about my brain, about my business, about the market, about all the things. Because I feel like I still feel this massive responsibility to. I'm leading a business, and now I have I have a partner, I have a sponsor partner that needs me to be as smart as I can be on behalf of all of our customers and our employees. So one of the podcasts I did was with a guy named Keith Mercurio. I don't expect you to know him. But in the home services space, he's worked with some of the big players and some of the big best practice agencies. And there's lots of coaches and things out there. But this one in particular, I think he might be based in Texas. I can't remember if he's down there or not. But he did a podcast with me on intention.
Arizona, it would be over there, not down there.
Well, that's a good point.
Our state's so big that it.
You know what I was thinking is, I think he was originally. I think he might live in the Twin Cities. So I'm looking on a map in my head and thinking
that would be up there.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, okay.
So now I'm thinking
Big Ten.
Big Ten. Yeah, sorry, won't bring it up again. But we did a podcast with him, and it was a 2-parter. So it was episode 154, 154, and 155 on intentional listening. So listening to understand and not listening to respond. And
wow,
it is. And so whenever I have do one of these with him, it's always a challenge because I'm constantly thinking on what am I saying? Because sometimes we just say filler words, and we don't even really mean the filler word, but we're just saying it because we're programmed to say filler words. Like I have the utmost respect for so-and-so. And he might say, "You do? Why?" Or I might say, "Oh man, you're so humble." And he's like, and even though he's a super nice guy, he's like, I'm not humble. And I'm like, okay, fine. You're not humble. Like I was trying to pay you a compliment, but you're not humble. And but I start to think about it, and I was like, there's some self-serving pieces to each one of us, and we have to acknowledge these things. But a big part of it is when I'm sitting at a table with you or listening to you, Brad, or listening to Steve, our buddy Steve, or listening to anybody, I'm trying to listen and really pay attention to what it is that they're saying and or asking to give a very thoughtful, transparent response, like genuine response. And that is a challenge, by the way, especially when you're a salesperson, right? Because salespeople have to, naturally are already thinking through how they want to respond before you've ever even finished what it is you're saying. So it's a trained skill. So that one is one that I've went back and listened to it a dozen times because I still pick things up from it. But that one is the one from a business perspective that's helped me multiple times. And any guarantee you, anybody listening right now that listens to that episode or those 2 episodes, I promise you, you will be better if you have a problem with listening. And if your spouse says you don't listen to me, this will help you there too.
I probably need to listen to that. So next week, you have the largest gathering in the industry at RYNO X, and you got Nick Saban to come talk. How in the world did you get Nick Saban, who's only been retired for about 45 days? How did you get him? I mean, did you call Mike Tyson and say, "Hey, can you call Nick for me?" Or how did that happen?
You know what? I just had this question asked me yesterday too. And got a little bit lucky for sure. But I knew how to play the game. So from doing multiple RYNO X events, and our Christmas parties are a pretty big deal at RYNO. We kind of go all out. I learned how to negotiate. It's the same thing as any customer journey, Brad. Like I've learned how to pitch what I want, knowing what they're going to object to and what they want for their customer. So I knew going into Saban, I got to make this as easy as possible for him to just show up. So easy thing, do a Q&A. Make it easy. Q&A, get him his green room, make sure he's got his little Debbie snacks in there, his oatmeal cream pies. But then also you got to pay him a big chunk of money. So Coach Saban make about $250,000 for an hour and a half.
Will he be podcast number 209?
I'm not sure, but he'll be one of them. So thankfully is you'll appreciate this. That it could be right after. I got one of our sponsors, to cover Coach Saban. So that worked out well, but it's because of what you said, like the particular event that we put on is called RYNO X. And it's about, $2.5 billion worth of contractors sitting in one room, but there's only like 50 contractors. So
it's crazy.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
So monster.
And you got a waiting list of people to get in there.
It's a big, huge, long wait list. It's an invite only event, but so you can't bring in somebody that's small. Last year I brought in the president of Starbucks, Howard, and that was cool. But then we finished the evening with Nelly, a concert with Nelly. So this year's Flow Rider, which I know you're really looking forward to. So don't forget to brush up on your Flow Rider, Brad.
I don't even know what Flow Rider is.
Guarantee you're going to know something.
I'm not big on music. Hey, one of the things that I think so highly of you and Anna is your philanthropic endeavors. And y'all give back just like it says right behind you. It's one thing to talk about that. It's another thing to actually do it. What got you into to doing that, and what is y'all's main focus?
Yeah, great question. Thanks for asking. This is the thing I'm most passionate about. I think a lot of people, giving back is one of our core values, and it's something that when we started our business, we hit the lowest of lows because we didn't know how to manage the business properly. Like we were selling, but we couldn't execute as fast, to get the revenue coming in because there's only two of us. We were selling more than we could do.
Okay, wait a minute. I want to clarify something. You said she ran the business side, so we can blame Anna for the early failures? So
no. I oversold.
Oh, okay.
Oversold
and under-delivered.
Yeah, and here's the deal: is where I messed up, and this was my call, is I wasn't charging enough. I think that happens a lot with new businesses, right? Like you want to come in and be the lowest cost option. Well, for the volume of work it was taking, and I wasn't charging enough, and I was selling a bunch. Well, now I know why I was selling a bunch, Brad, because I wasn't charging enough. And we hit kind of a pretty financial hardship coming from these very successful sales relationship I had to now doing, living on my own. We hit some like real financial hardships, like sitting in this nice 6,000 square foot house, in Indiana, and having to figure, do we turn on the gas or we turn on the electric? Like you had to make a decision, and that was a pretty powerful moment. I remember sitting in the bedroom, like this big, huge bedroom, and with my wife and my daughter at the time, and having to put like towels under the door and putting in the space heater. Because at least you could plug in the space heater if you kept the electric, right? And you could heat the room, and just sitting there thinking like, man, where did I go wrong? Like, I feel like I'd started this business to do the right thing, and I went wrong. And that's actually when I started, we started going to church then. And not that we didn't believe, but we just weren't a part, like it wasn't a part of the thing. We're trying to build a business. Because you kind of hit this moment, I'm like, well, listen, I don't know what else to do. So like, maybe this is what I need to do. Maybe I'm not focusing enough on this. Really what it did was prepare me for everything else on this journey, because I've been giving back, I don't even know how many millions of dollars to this point. I wish I'd have kept track, but it was one of those deals where at our lowest moment, I was able to go and people were like, we go to church, meet a few people, and that just felt like, okay, cool. I feel like we're doing something good, and some opportunities started to happen for us. And I never forgot that. So I was like, I'm always like, I don't know what it is. Call me superstitious, call whatever you want, but as long as I continued to give back, even when I had nothing, even if it was just my time, and it was quite a bit, I still did it because I believed like it was going to like show up. And so I just kept doing it. And still to this day, like if you can imagine today, 180 people, one day every single month, which is how we've done it forever. One day every single month, we shut down the office for the 4 hours they work, because they work 4 nines and a 4. So one Friday every single month, every person goes and does community service somewhere, and I cover their salaries. So that way,
Wow.
there's zero output to
cool.
the business, right? But they're pouring into themselves, which keeps our turnover low. I still am giving back at scale. So it's not just like me writing a check, which we do, but it's also.
Well, you're still paying their salaries.
That's right. And still making donations to these places. But think about how good that feels. Like how you make your money is more important than how much money you make.
So I asked you the question earlier, what was one of the coolest things in a podcast? If somebody asked me that question, that's it right there. That Friday, that is really a cool concept. So I assume that when you were overselling, that at some point Anna came along and invented RYNO tracks so that y'all could have an innovative approach and provide value because you were raising your prices. And RYNO tracks is such an innovative approach to nobody else. I mean, we've been through a lot of firms over the years. Nobody else does that. Can you share with our listeners why RYNO tracks is such a innovative tool and how it could help them should they want to come do business with you?
Yeah, sure. So thank you for asking that question. And this is literally the foundation of the company. We built the company on the back of this thing. And talk about being transparent. And you heard me talking about in the beginning, tracking everything. That's what I related to. RYNO tracks was a way to say, hey, let's take all the feelings and all the guesswork out of, are we doing a good job or not doing a good job? Because if we as a company believe that we're doing good and provide, bringing in new customers for you, we don't mind sharing the exact details of it. What happens is a lot of agencies don't give you, like they give you some information, but you really don't know. Like you can swap the numbers around and become subjective, and you never really can trust. Are they doing a good job or are they not? It's based on a feeling. So what we decided to do with RYNO tracks, and we did this from the beginning, which is part of what made everything difficult, Brad, was we were building the websites, doing the SEO, doing the pay-per-click ourselves, but then we were putting call tracking numbers on the website. And then we listened to every single phone call that came through that website for the customer. So that way we could tell them, was this legit new customer? Was it a repeat customer? What was the lead type? Was this a repair? Was this a roof leak? Was this a re-roof? What was it? So that way we knew exactly what the customer calling in was asking for, and were they a new customer, a legit new bookable customer or not? If we knew those numbers and we're confident we could provide enough of those to our customer, the thought was they won't leave, right? You won't leave. If we do a good job and you know exactly what we're doing, regardless of how you perform on it, you won't leave. And it's still that way today. It's evolved quite a bit, and I'm not listening to phone calls anymore. But that's the reason we did it, was we thought, you know what, let's just be transparent, which is another one of our core values. And some months aren't great. If out of 12 months, some months aren't great. But if I have 2 bad months and I just own it and I don't try to BS you, right, and try to make something out of it, but I have 10 great months, the odds of you staying are pretty good as long as I'm delivering. So it's just us continuing to be real and say, hey, we did everything we could this month, because I don't think that you think I'm trying to have a bad month. This month, let me see if we can do a crappy job this month. That's not how it works. So being honest about it.
I don't think you got to work.
Yeah. So the downside to being so transparent and tracking everything. So to the listeners, to give you some perspective on what that path looks like, is most agencies, and Brad, you can attest to this, most agencies stop at lead generation, or what they consider, I use air quotes, lead generation. We've chased it
because that's what they think their role is.
And that
make the phone ring. That's it.
That's it. It's so much more than that. Like, it is so much more than that to really, even though it's not your responsibility as a marketing company, it is if you want to have long-term value and maintain a great reputation. So I want to be able to know in San Antonio, Texas, if someone types roof repair into Google, meaning they don't know who the heck they don't have a particular business name in mind, no matter how well branded you are, I want that customer for Beldon. So I'm going to say, okay, this person typed in roof repair, they went to the website, and then they called you. So when they called you, my team's going to listen to, one, was this legit? Is the lead quality good? Yes, we recognized it's a roof repair lead, just like they typed in on Google. And then I want to hear, how did your team perform on booking that customer? So that way we're holding each other accountable. I brought in the opportunity for you. How's your team doing? Now, Brad, you can't wear all those hats. You have a lot of employees too. So if I can catch it for you, that's me being a good marketing partner for you, right? I can find out, hey, Jill missed this objection. You might want to have her listen to this phone call and do some training, some CSR training or some.
No, I agree with you, because at the end of the day, on the contractor side, it's all, well, for both of us, it's a matter of numbers, right? But just for round numbers, let's say that I paid you $30 and I had a closing ratio of 30%, roughly, round numbers, right? And so it would take 3 leads for me to sell one, right? And so I'd be spending $100. Most marketing firms just look at that $100. What's unique about RYNO is you want to know whether that $100 investment led, for my net sales per lead issued, did that lead to a $2,000 sale or did that lead to a $4,000 sale? Because the cost of acquisition for a customer is one thing, but the total sale on the back end of that lead is a huge thing. And that's what y'all focus on. And that's why I think RYNO is such an incredible, innovative approach to handling a contractor side of the business.
That's just it. Is it takes all the feeling out of it, right? Like, all the feeling is gone because we're talking about facts, and then the facts will make you feel one way or the other, but it takes I feel like you did or didn't do a great job out of it. But if I genuinely care about growing your business, and I do, I want you to know that information too, just like I want my team to know that information, because you mentioned cost per customer acquisition. Yes, that is like the main metric I think to measure off of, but you also can't judge your marketing agency based on that one metric, because really their job is to just bring you the marketing customer. I mean, the customer through marketing. It's just that the better agency helps you chase it all the way through to the sales, because what you should be able to see is, if you're using like an AccuLinks or a Job Nimbus or whatever it is that you're using, you should be able to see that the exact number, exact revenue dollars that you've closed from those new customers. But you should also be paying attention to what is the revenue that is pending that you haven't closed yet, because you need to attribute both of those back to your agency's success or failure. That's an important metric that most people miss.
Yeah. Why? And well, you forgot to mention Osby. But I agree with you that's important, but it still goes down to what you're able to do is to develop, you're developing value before we ever meet with the customer. And so the cost of acquisition of the customer is one thing, but I still go back to the net sales per lead issued. That as that number increases, the value proposition of doing business with somebody like you, it's like golden handcuffs. Nobody wants to leave, right? Because for every customer, let's say that the number was $2,000, and I'm with marketing firm A and it's $1,500, and RYNO has got it up to $3,000. I'm sticking with you in perpetuity, right? Because you understand the value of driving a customer that wants to do business with you, not just a customer that wants to call and make the phone ring.
Exactly. It makes me a true partner, not just a marketing, not just a vendor of yours.
Right. And not many people understand that. And I think that's what makes RYNO special. And I'm glad that we changed and the partnership that we work with y'all, and we're transparent, both sides, right? If we're not happy with something, we tell you. If you're not happy with something, you tell us. Doesn't mean that it's a vengeful type of discussion. It's, hey, what do we have to do for both of us to be successful so that we can both win?
Yeah. I mean, that's part of, I think, what's a big issue today is, just because you disagree doesn't mean it's a fight. You just disagree. And
no, just means you disagree.
You disagree.
Right.
It's not a fight.
Well, yeah. And actually, that leads me to a question I wanted to ask you the other day about disagreeing, because, like, if I had gone to Barrett Jackson with Susan, I can tell you that we would have left there with like 3 cars that she would not have known how to drive, and I wouldn't have wanted. So I think our audience will want to know, you went to Barrett Jackson. What did Anna take home?
Well, she took home me. Okay, there's a big win. We did bid on we bid on 3 different cars. This, by the way, this was a box I wanted to check forever, and I could have bought this car forever ago, but I have different
It's
goals.
cool, that place.
I have a different, I give myself goals, and so I'd accomplished my goal, and I thought, okay, good. This is the year I'm finally going to bid at Barrett-Jackson, and I say we really, I kind of led this agenda and got her buy-in on what I wanted to look at. So I love classic car, like the old school classic cars, like so the 55, 56, 57 Chevy Bel Airs, like the old school iconic cars. And so we bid on the first 2 and didn't win them. Didn't even come close to winning them, by the way. Like I still gave myself a budget. Well, we gave myself a budget. And the last one we bid on was a 1956 Chevy Bel Air. It's gorgeous, Nassau blue and ivory. And we won that car. So we got it. So we brought home a 1956 Chevy Bel Air that we named Donna.
That's pretty cool. That's really cool. So are you going to send pictures of Donna?
Absolutely.
So I can't call you and say, how's Donna doing, right? I might get in trouble.
No, you totally can, because they know who Donna. The girls helped name that car Donna. And I don't know if you've ever heard this song before, but there's a song by Richie Valens called Donna. And
oh yeah, I know the song.
So that was literally the first song I played because I drove it home from Barrett-Jackson, which is in Scottsdale. I live about 30 minutes north, but I took the back roads because I didn't want to go on the main interstate and get like rock chips and stuff in it. But I wanted to drive it home. I got a lot of interesting looks in that car. They're like, "What is this guy doing driving this old 56 Chevy Bel Air?"
That's pretty funny. Well, I know you're busy. Just a couple more questions, and then we'll let you go. You've been doing this a long time. What's the most bizarre digital request somebody's ever asked for? Did they want you to put something up there that defied the law of physics? Did they want you to fix what you and I would consider to be an ugly kitchen? Did they want SEC superimposed on the front of the house on the roof so everybody driving by knew not to pull for a Big Ten team? I mean, what's the craziest thing that you've seen, in your 16 years?
Oh my gosh. You mean as far as like marketing tactics that they're using?
Yeah, that somebody said, "Hey, I want you to do this on my website."
Oh boy. You know what? It's probably more so in the home services sector, where the HVAC guys will use your wife's hot and put very inappropriate like videos that are like borderline.
That's funny.
Gray. But
that's funny.
Your wife's
that's a great
hot.
line.
Yes. And then you also have those that are plumbers that will going into the day after Thanksgiving is known to most of the world as Black Friday. But to plumbers, it's known as Brown Friday. So you can put 2 and 2 together.
Oh,
and so
sorry. That's funny.
Some interesting marketing campaigns around it. But if you can imagine, Brad, it's like borderline. It's either inappropriate or it's going to land, one of the two.
That's funny. Man, now I got 2 things that I could talk about on somebody says, "What's the funniest thing on a podcast?"
Brown Friday.
I'm not sure which one's funnier, your wife is hot or it's Brown Friday. So Ryan, that Team Beldon's a huge fan of RYNO. Some of our guests might be interested in connecting with your team. What's the best way that they can contact the RYNO team?
Yeah, thanks for that. Easiest thing to do. Well, I'm actually pretty much live my life on the record, so you can go find me almost anywhere on social media. It's same with the company, but if you want to go to our website directly, and RYNO is spelled a little bit funky. It's RYNOSS.com is the actual website, RYNOSS.com. So it's not your normal RHINO, but you can go there and easily get a hold of somebody. I promise you someone's going to respond to you fast because we have somebody on that sucker 24/7. That is here in the United States of America, like all my employees. I'm going to put that out there.
And then they're going to listen to the phone call on RYNO Tracks.
What's it?
And they're going to listen to the phone call on RYNO Tracks.
Absolutely. You're going to hear it. That's the easiest way to get in touch with me. And then, of course, you can listen to the Point Home Services podcast. Like, it's on pretty much every single platform you can think of. And I share a lot of success like this too, Brad. And I'm going to, once we kind of get down the path a little bit more, I want to bring you on so you can actually talk through the experiences. And that's what makes the whole thing fun. I'll be able to bring you into my world and talk about your journey.
Well, that's great. Ryan, a sincere thank you for being on today's episode of the Brad Beldon Show and providing such valuable perspectives on the digital marketing area and your leadership. To our audience, thank you again for tuning in today. And as my friend Judd Ashmore used to tell me, hug somebody. It'll make you feel better.